Yeah, what's going on? About to get this going. Give me 2 seconds. Mm, 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 mm. Hmm? Yeah. No.
What was it, like 6, 7 months ago? You were here. Well, it was, yes, it was in October. It was on October 7th. So now I remember.
A little bit of a dog whistle.
We
there,
put it
yeah.
out. We put it out on October.
We did that
I
intentionally.
couldn't.
That was our plan.
Dude, it was. I remember whenever we were trying to make it work. I remember we were like texting, and I was like, "Oh, can you do the 10th?" And you were like, "I can't do the 10th. Can you do the 6th?" I was like, "I can't do the 6th, 7th." And we were both like, "Oh, we can do the 7th." And then it was the moment after. I think we both realized we're like, we just booked this on October 7th, didn't we? This is going to get taken the wrong way. Anyway, October 8th. Okay, so about 7 months ago, since you were here, that episode was my most viewed podcast I've ever done.
Wow.
By far. It was I think they got like 4 million views or something like that. I know it broke 2 million on YouTube, it broke 1 million on Spotify, and then I think between the others got it on. So anyway, I had Tucker and Candace on my show in that stretch, but our episode was the most viewed one, which I thought was kind of interesting. And I mean, obviously those guys are enormous. I'm not trying to downplay that, but it was something particularly interesting. You're a guy who, because you've been so censored off so many platforms, it's almost hard to get a gauge of like how big you are, if that makes sense, because it's like your clips are everywhere. The clips are, so it's not like you're exactly getting a total view count of like how many millions of people have seen.
So I'm gonna run a poll in the chat, and I want you guys to let me know whether or not you think Nick is a Fed. Just out of curiosity.
In all these clips, and because you can't go, you're still not allowed, which is very weird in a way, because in a sense it feels like we're living after the big censorship moment,
right?
And it feels like you're clearly one of the biggest people in this world, but you still can't have a YouTube channel, and you still can't really have a Twitter account.
Yeah, no, I'm not eligible for X Premium. And well, and here's the other thing. What's funny is, so, you know, we consider doing advertisements on the show this year. I've never done advertisements before. And so we approached some of the sponsors.
Let me have a Jewish conversation with you here, Nick. You need advertising.
Yeah, I'm leaving money on the table, I think, without it. But, you know, we go to them, and obviously they want the analytics because they want to know the demographics we're reaching and how big the audience is. And what's funny is something like Twitter, in order to get your analytics on Twitter to see age, race, etc., you need premium. So it's like, we not only can I and my team, we can't even access the platforms, even on the ones we have, can't even get the numbers. So we can't even supply the numbers to get paid by a sponsor. So yeah, I mean, when you're censored, it's like there's no records. It's like a book burning thing, because it's like you just have none of the information available at all.
Which in a weird way just seems bad for everyone. Like, I'm not sure who benefits from that, because it's kind of like at this point, they're in this weird, I don't know, like gray area where you're like, well, it's not okay. At a point 5 years ago, 8 years ago, it was at least working to shut you up to some degree. It was relegating you to a corner. At this point, it's like you're all over the algorithm everywhere, and all it creates is this situation like that where you're like, in some ways, it's like maybe they don't want it to be known exactly how big you are. But I don't know. I found that to be very interesting. Yeah. So okay. So I wanted a bunch of stuff I want to talk to you about. A lot's happened since last time we talked.
Yes.
Jeez. Most of it not good. But so I was watching, I talked to you briefly about this when we first came in. So I was watching today. So I watched a buddy of mine, Dave Brenner, runs a great YouTube channel called Liberty Vault. He had done like a comment on your debate with Steven Crowder. But so I had watched that, but I hadn't actually watched the thing. So I was watching that this morning. I had a similar debate with Steven Crowder months earlier, but a similar type of debate over supporting the Republicans, supporting Trump. And there was just something about this debate that I just found painful. Like, it's painful to listen to. And I don't mean this as like an attack on Steven Crowder. You know, I didn't love the way he handled the interview with me, but whatever. You know, recently, just the other day, Andrew Wilson, who I like very much, he challenged me to debate like a similar type thing, like whether we should support Democrats or whether Democrats should win the midterms. And I was like, why don't we just debate the war? Why don't we
Right.
just like keep it a little bit more narrow? And he was like, well, no, because I'm opposed to the war too. But I was like, yeah, but clearly there's a pretty big gap between how opposed you are and how opposed I am. And I think that gets at the heart of it. There is something particularly about the debate, like, should we support the Republicans? One of the problems is that it's very, very broad. So a million different issues get inserted, and then they run down a list of like all the accomplishments of the regime. And I was kind of trying to narrow it, but I was thinking a bit about why this argument is frustrating me so much. Like why it's so frustrating. And I don't exactly know why. Like, why do you think it's frustrating me so much?
I don't know. I mean, I was a little frustrated too, and I guess the way I would summarize it is that I don't know that it's disingenuous, but it's almost missing the forest for the trees. Would be maybe the best way to say it, because I remember I was talking to some buddies about the debate afterward, and I like Stephen. I thought it was a good debate, good faith, but I said on literally every single issue, you're getting the GOP talking point. You're getting the memo. Like on Iran, for example, I remember when they launched the war, everybody obviously said, well, what happened to no new wars? And is this not literally identical to Iraq? It's this question about WMDs and they're killing the protesters. And, we're going to do regime change and make it a democracy. Like very similar in many ways, especially how it played out in the lead up to the war. And everybody obviously recognizes that's a deep fundamental betrayal of Trumpism, which was always about bringing the troops home from Iraq and Afghanistan, putting America first, the rest of it. And I remember what the Republicans said on Twitter is, well, Trump always said we were going to war with Iran because he said they should never have a nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
And then the other thing they said was, well, he said no forever wars. And the real forever war is the war Iran has been waging on us, and we're putting an end to it. And you go, yeah, that really stretches the bounds of what anybody could credibly believe, in good faith. And so that was something that came up in the debate. And you just go, yeah, no, you're kind of missing the point here. Like if he campaigned on we're going to bomb Iran for regime change for years in a war of choice, I don't think anybody be lining up to vote for that. He said no new wars. And now they want to introduce this technicality to kind of get out of that. So to me, that really characterizes, I don't know that it's bad faith, but it almost feels like you're arguing with a brick wall. It's like you're not really being totally honest.
Dude, there's a certain
Stephen Steven Crowder is 100% a talking head for the GOP. You're not going to get anything other than Trump talking points. No independent thinking on his show whatsoever. He is another one of those conservative Inc. I'll never vote for a Democrat. There is no compromise. We can find no common ground. And he is the type of person that will prevent us from breaking the cycle.
I've been talking about this a lot lately. There's a certain like category of kind of MAGA influencers or whatever. And I'm not talking about like the Israel lobby. Like I'm not talking about Ben Shapiro or Barry Weiss or something like that. I'm talking about, Benny Johnson or Steven Crowder or Will Chamberlain or guys like this, where it feels like, as you're saying here, right? They go, okay, so the talking point is we've been at war with them for 47 years and ending the wars. Okay, well, if it's been going for 47 years, why wasn't that the campaign? So why weren't any of you saying this at the time? And then it's like as the goalposts move, they will move with them too. I debated Will Chamberlain on Piers Morgan's show like 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now. And he says, because of the pressure that we're putting on Iran with our blockade of their blockade, he goes, I'll be surprised if this regime makes it another month. And so then I said, in another month, when this regime is still standing, I will mention that to you and you will move the goalposts and still support this war. So we got about a week until this is up. And there's just this thing where like, in the 12-day war, they would have said, see, no American casualties, no more than that. Then this one, we have American casualties. Yeah, but it's only been a few, and at a certain point, you're like, am I talking to the White House press secretary? Is that the job here? Is the job basically that the administration?
Do we even have an actual number on U.S. casualties? Because from all the open source intel that I have gone through, the administration is completely covering up injuries, deaths of troops, damage to aircraft carriers. Supposedly the aircraft carrier that had a kitchen fire is going to be out for 18 months with a fucking kitchen fire. For real? Like, does that make sense to anybody?
Administration does something, you find out what that is, you go out and defend that. And if that contradicts everything you said last week, well, whatever, that's the job. The job is just to defend the administration. That's what it feels like when you're going and you're rattling off this list, which everyone does through every press. I remember in the first Trump term, I remember in the Obama administration, that you know, all the who are the, you know, the like young liberal guys who are like the you've
Like
debated,
Harry
I think.
Sisson
Yes,
and
yeah,
them,
like
yeah.
Harry said, this is Harry Sisson, you know, it's like the Inflation Reduction Act, blah blah blah, this blah, blah, like just a list of things that they did. You're like, hey, can we get into that list? Because essentially what you have is what he passed a big giant spending bill, and then, oh wow, this is brand new. Oh, all-time stock market. Oh, I didn't dude, it's crazy. I haven't heard a president brag about having an all-time high stock market since Biden and Trump the first time, and Obama and Bush and Clinton. Literally yes, we live in an inflationary economy, motherfucker. The prices of things go up. Hey, guess what? The pricing of housing has never been higher, and the price of college has never been higher, and the price of daycare is, and yeah, stocks too. This means nothing.
Right.
And so there's something, I don't know, about just rattling off this list of what they've achieved when you're like, but dude, by your own, and this is one of the things that's frustrating about the Crowder debate, by your own admission, we're up against it with the Democrats coming in, right? By your own admission, we're losing the entire country if the Democrats come back in. Okay, launching this war just guaranteed that the Democrats come back in. You should be angrier about this than I am.
Right.
Or as angry.
Well, yeah, I mean, and to me, I always said this on my show. It feels to me like you have this relationship between the base of the party or the people in the country, and then there's the administration and the regime, you know, or the Republican leadership. And I always felt like during the election, I was speaking towards the administration with the people behind me, saying, like in 2024, I said, I'm not going to vote for Trump unless he promises explicitly no war with Iran, and we're going to get an immigration moratorium. And I felt like we were taking our own side as the voters, as the base, as the America First Republicans, and saying our vote is conditional. We have this set of demands. And it feels like these other influencers, like you say, like a Benny Johnson, a Steven Crowder, et cetera, they're facing us with their back to the party. Yeah. And everything the administration does, their job is to sell it to us so that we are prepared to go out and vote in the midterms, vote in the next cycle, whatever. And so it does just become like you are a regime apologist. That's actually your job. You don't even necessarily have an ideology. And what's more, I don't even really think you're on our side, because it's sort of like your job is to launder this to us. So, and it was like that with every issue. The Iran one, I mean, that was probably the biggest one, but it was on every single one, like you said. And when you would catch him on one thing, it was, well, what about this? What about that? What about, we talked about the border wall. I said, well, the border wall was promised in 2016. Yeah. It's still not built. I think they constructed 50 miles of new wall in the first administration. There's no progress on it really in the second administration. He goes, well, you know, it's more than the Democrats would have built. And he go, okay, but so is the goal for like Republicans to win, or is it for us to fix the country? Because it feels like we're a little bit confused here. So, and I said this on the lead up to the interview or the debate. I said he's really caught up in the partisanship, Republican, Democrat, and that's the element of it. And I think you're on the money when you say it's like Harry Sisson. Yeah. It's like that seems to be your kind of job. And I'm not on the side of the party. I just want the country to get better. So that's the miscommunication.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really like the way you put that, but standing with your back to the people versus your back to the party, it does feel that way. Also, I just, on some fundamental level, I go, if you're doing that, like if you're that degree of a partisan, what's the point of you? Like, I can listen to the White House press secretary. I can listen to Donald Trump. I don't need, like, if you're in this world, whatever this world of us is, where we're talking about politics on our show, what's the point of us? if you
Right.
don't have your own thought. You know what I mean? Like if you're just representing one of the parties, I already know what the official party line is. I think, well, look, like for example, with the immigration example, right? So you go, okay, so you're going to say Donald Trump built some amount of wall in his first term. Okay. If we had elected Hillary Clinton, we can all agree we would have gotten zero amount of wall. Great. We got some wall with Donald Trump. Okay. In the following 4 years, how many tens of millions of people came? Oh, the answer is none of us know. None of us actually even know. Some guess 10, 20. I've seen different projections. We don't even know how many illegals live in the country. But so look, just take that example, right? So you fail to build the whole wall. What does that mean? That means you've failed entirely. And so what we, of course, should be looking for, if we recognize the Democrats as this existential threat, is what type of foundational permanent changes can be made that will not allow the next administration to just come in and undo all of it, which is a major glaring hole in the Trump administration right now. Because look, as we've talked about before, he was never really that good at wielding power. He was very good at campaigning. He was always very good at campaigning and telling you how good he'd be at wielding power. But the problem is, right, Donald Trump comes in, he wants to govern by executive order. He kind of likes governing by executive order. First of all, he's not splitting any of the credit. It's all him. He gets to sit down on day one and do this photo op where he signs all the. But what's the problem with that, Nick? Is that day one, I guarantee you, day one of the next Democratic presidency is going to be them doing the exact same thing, doing the same thing where they sit down and they sign 500 executive orders, nullifying every last one of Donald Trump's executive orders. So where's the win in that?
Right. Well, and that's exactly what happened with Biden. And here's what's funny, sort of the structure of that argument is he says, well, and Republicans in general, they'll say, so Biden comes in, he brings in 10, 20 million illegals. That's why Democrats are this existential threat. We have to vote Republican every time. And like you say, we elected Trump the first time to build the wall. Why? Because a wall can never be undone. That was sort of the whole point, is it's this irreversible, there is no more illegal immigration. We've solved it, and it immunizes us against a future Democrat administration. So the way the causal relationship works is that your failure to build the wall directly created the illegal immigration crisis. And so then you have to say it's not just a matter of getting Republicans elected, but getting Republicans elected to do the right job. And then it gets back into, we have an interest as the base and as the country that we're advocating for. Obviously, the party has their own interest, which is to be elected. And that means they need to balance these compromises between the voters, the donors, their patronage network, and so on. And so at that point,
I don't think the voters mean anything anymore. I think it is strictly the donors, the foreign lobbies, the foreign interests, the political PACs, big agriculture, big pharma, anybody that pays to get these politicians elected, that is who they are serving, which is why nothing is getting done for the average American.
Say, okay, so whose side really are you on? And there's this other rhetorical trick they do, which is you like to say, I'm really disappointed with Trump. He's either not living up to his promises or straight up betraying us. It's not even just like they had setbacks or they're incompetent, bad at governing, but in some cases, they're just not doing what they said they would do because they don't want to. Like with illegal immigration, why is Trump reluctant to deport illegals from farms, hospitality? Wall Street and big agriculture don't want him to. And I said that during the election, like it's not simply that the Democrats are obstructing him. They're choosing not to.
Andrew,
and they know
it'll never happen
because they're going to have these podcasters and influencers telling the voters, oh no, Trump is really trying. It's the Democrats and so on. And the rhetorical trick that they will use is if you're not satisfied with Republicans, they say, oh, but the Democrats are going to be so much worse. And always the hyperbole. It's not just that the Democrats will be worse. They're going to make Puerto Rico and D.C. a state. They're going to pack the Supreme Court. They're going to bring in 100 million illegals. If Democrats get in, it's over forever. And you want to say, well, it wasn't over forever under Biden. And if it was, why didn't they fight to keep Trump in office in 2020? And if it's going to be over in 24, why aren't they nuking the filibuster to pass the SAVE
Yep.
Act? So somebody's lying here. Why is it that the voters are in this existential, like,
Yep.
nervous system cycle? It's all going to be over. But Republicans are like, yeah, Democrats are going to win. It's going to be fine. We got to keep the filibuster. So, you know, that's when you
You want to know the answer to that question? It's because both parties are two wings of the same bird. So they know no matter what, whichever party gets elected and has control of the House and the Senate, the status quo will remain the same. And until there is a groundswell of change from the age of 50 down, and we finally had enough, that's when we will have change.
realize we're being lied to effectively.
Well, there's a parallel between the rhetoric the Democrats use about Donald Trump and then, you know, like I remember talking about this when Trump got shot in 24, and you'd see like Obama and Hillary Clinton wish him a speedy recovery, and you're like, wait, is he
Right.
Hitler, or do you wish him a speedy recovery? Because like, is it the end
Yes.
of democracy, or do we hope this guy recovers so that we can hold elections in a few months? Because like, you really can't have both of those. Like, so you can't wish Hitler a speedy recovery. Well, all right, maybe on your show, but I'm not on, but on Hillary Clinton's show, you can't wish Hitler a speedy recovery. But right, so it's like a kind of similar thing to that. Now, again, I don't think either of us are trying to downplay the threat that is the Democrats. I mean, look, the Democratic establishment over the last 15 years really overstepped in a major way. They took it to a next level, even for American norms. Like just the way they interfered in the presidential elections, you know, framing Donald Trump for treason, like all of these things. But again, that's why it would be that much more important that like, and this is a major one for me. It seems to be such low-hanging fruit. But like, you didn't get any prosecutions off Russiagate, dude. Russiagate, it's you.
Right.
The one time Trump might stand up for someone is when it's him. That's the only time, right? He's not going to stand up for the J6ers. And I know they brag he got him out of jail.
No prosecutions on Russiagate. No prosecutions on the 2020 election. No prosecution on Fauci. No prosecutions on the Epstein files. Why? Because it's all one party. They are subservient to their donors, and that is it. The American people, I don't even think our votes matter anymore. If Thomas Massey loses his election because Miriam Adelson throws $35 million into a congressional primary, all that does is send the message that our congressional and our Senate seats are for sale to the highest bidder.
4 years later, after letting him get tortured for years and condemning him at the time, when he could have pardoned him right away, but you know, he would have had to take
Number
a hit.
one, yeah.
Right. But it's you. Your own director of national intelligence came out and said she has proof that Obama committed treason. And I got to say, I think she does. I mean, maybe treason isn't the right word, but something. I mean, there's clear criminal activity. And no, we're not going after anyone for that. But the problem isn't just getting your own vengeance. It's that like, but now you didn't destroy the apparatus that can do this to you or the next you in the future. I think that me and you are looking at this from a much more like zoomed out, big picture view. And even when you go, like you're talking about immigration, you're like, okay, but zoom out. What's the major problem with immigration in the country? Okay, well, the major problem is essentially that the regime has essentially, in an attempt to replace the domestic population, or at least dilute the domestic population, has flooded the country with third world immigration by the millions in huge numbers against the will of the American people. Okay, so that's the problem. You could say the problem is, maybe from your perspective, long-term demographic change or something like that. That is not even remotely solved. The problem is exactly the same problem. And by the way, this is his best issue. This is where he's done the best. The one thing that we'd all kind of have to give him credit for is like, okay, the border is secure now. It was not at the past. Now it is secure. But that's the best you got. It's like you're driving off a cliff at 90 miles per hour. And he goes, I slowed you down to 85, but we're still headed toward this cliff. Then you don't get credit for solving the problem. And you know what I was saying, Donald Trump likes to govern by executive order. I was saying not knowing how to wield power. You make a very important correction to that, which is in some cases, it's actually wielding government power on behalf of, say, a foreign country or something like that, which has clearly been the priority from the beginning of this administration. But you go, look, dude, you came in your first time, you had Congress. You come in your second time, you have both houses of Congress and your own Supreme Court. He had so much political opportunity there to like go like, hey, listen, Congress, I'm demanding a one-page standalone bill that says this, you know, and actually do something that is going to really change this, which is not that impossible to do. But, you know, you could, okay, look, he didn't have the juice to like get an amendment to the Constitution. What do you need, like 75% plus ratifying the states? Okay, you're not there. Although you could even make a really big show about an amendment to the Constitution, but some real amendment that just goes like, and even if it wasn't an amendment, it was a law, but like a law that goes, we're forcing every state prison to open their books to us and get every illegal that's in prisons out of the country. Like a slam dunk 80-20 issue with the American people. Like there's creative ways to wield power. And he never even really tried, is how it seems to me.
No, and it's like that on every single issue. It's like that with the tariffs, because on the tariffs, they specifically told them in the first administration, there's two ways you could do this. You can do these national security tariffs, and that'll take time because we have to do these studies about them. It'll take a couple of years, but they're going to be airtight. And they went with that in the first term, and those tariffs are still in place. Now, they had this discussion in the first term also. They said there's another way we could go about it. It's these emergency tariffs.
Right.
And you have so much more latitude. You could do them whenever you want unilaterally. They said, but it's not going to hold up in court. And this was Bob Lighthizer, who was the trade representative in the first term. He said you should go with the first one. And they did, and it worked. Second term, had the same conversation. Trump said, I want the emergency tariffs because then I could use them not even so much for economic purposes, but for diplomatic purposes. I could use them to punish or reward countries for diplomacy and so on. Those tariffs, all of them were overturned by the Supreme Court. Comes back with Section 122. Okay, we could put a 10% tariff on everybody right now for 6 months while we work on these other ones. Got shut down by a council of federal or committee of federal judges last week. And you say the right way to go about, and I know maybe you don't agree because you're a libertarian.
No, I don't agree with the tariffs, but I'm curious to hear your point.
But since, you know, Trump is a protectionist and that's part of the agenda, the way to go about it would be a tariff schedule passed by Congress, which we haven't done in 100 years. And arguably, you could make the case because that's government revenue. That's hundreds of billions of dollars in perpetuity the government collects. And that would have been the way to do it. And it's the same thing with any of these different policies. You could do an executive order, cheap, easy. Trump can do it at a whim, or he can actually take the time, do it in the legislature, do it in a more comprehensive, systematic way, and it stands for, you know, decades or a century or something. He always goes with the former. And this gets back to one, and you are right, Trump is incompetent. Like, he's terrible at governing. That is 100% true. But it also gets back to the original point, which is, who are we advocating on behalf of? Because for me, it's like, for us, for the people, we have to win, or quality of life for us gets really bad. Like, we actually all have skin in the game. So we need Trump to succeed. I'm not out here rooting for him to fall because I'm just like mad. I'm rooting for him to succeed because if he doesn't, it's we that have to live among the third world immigrants. It's we that suffer because our purchasing power is destroyed, and we are going to die in the war potentially if there's a draft, or even if not, it's the gas prices. It's everything else. And so we want it to succeed, but obviously the politicians, if they had it their way, they would be, one, lazy, but two, make the compromises they need to get their golden parachute, take care of their donors, whatever. So it comes down to interest-based politics. I'm on the side of the people and our issues. This whole other class, it really is they're not on the same team as us.
Yeah.
You know, you have to, we always talk about the Republicans are this we need to win. We gotta, it's not we, it's them and us.
yeah.
Well, that's right. And especially when like
And that statement right there applies to all sides of the aisle. I don't know if I think the Republicans right now see it more than the Democrats do, because so many of us feel alienated by Trump that we see the bullshit for what it is. I don't think it's that many with the Democrats. I don't think the willingness is there to call the Democrat Party out on their shit. I think they are still going to be in lockstep the entire time. And that's a problem, because for us to really get to solutions, we need a coalition from both sides. And I don't care if you hate me or disagree with me or not, but the corruption in Washington is so bad that a shoot off of the Republican Party is not going to be enough to enact changes to reform this. This needs to be a coalition of people from the right, people from the left, independents, everybody that is tired of having their politicians bought out from underneath them.
Donald Trump is flat out saying MAGA is Mark Levin. Like, that's who it is. Not only is it not Nick Fuentes, it's not even Tucker Carlson, not Candace Owens, not Alex Jones, not Megyn Kelly. We can't even compromise on Megyn Kelly. Like, I'd get on board if it was Megyn Kelly. You know, a lot of times people will say this like, oh, Dave, you're just such a radical that you'll be upset unless you get everything I want. Motherfucker, everything I want is not even on the table. It's not even in the realm of possibility. Like, do you really think like if Donald Trump like got the border secured, maybe just like slowed down on the money printing, like we weren't devaluing our currency so fast and didn't start any wars and had a reasonable, like I'd be sitting here going like, but he didn't abolish the income tax. Like, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying we can't meet at Megyn Kelly.
Right.
I have to support Mark Levin. Well, no, like, no,
Yeah.
We're not in any ways on the same team. I am much more on Anna Kasparian's team than I am on Mark Levin's team. So I'm sorry. I know this blows partisan people's brains.
Absolutely.
But they have this weird thing. You see the video they made that went viral of you and Anna Kasparian. And
Yes,
it's like,
yeah.
but it's so dumb, dude. They're trying to make like, look, they have the exact same talking points. And it's like, no, what you found is that they say the things that every critic of Israel says. Like,
Yep.
yeah, this is like kind of the basic, like here's a point where he said they're committing genocide and she said they're committing genocide. It's like, yeah, that, and they go horseshoe theory proved. And you're like, okay, but like, you know, there's a middle part of that horseshoe too.
Right.
Like also Nancy Pelosi and Donald Trump and Mark Levin. You know what I mean? Like they all say the same thing. You could do the same thing about them all saying we can't allow them to have nuclear weapons or whatever. Like this just doesn't prove anything. And when it comes to this war in Iran, it seems to me that like if you're for it, there is no meaningful way that we are on the same team.
Right.
And so I think I think this is kind of why I responded to Andrew Wilson with why don't we just debate the war? Because even though you might say you're against it, and I believe, I'm not saying he's not against it, I'm sure he is, but I think part of this also fundamentally comes down to what you think this war is. Like I heard Andrew Wilson describe it in his debate with Owen Schroyer, I believe it was. I think that's who he debated. And he said, he goes, oh, he's just killing pedophiles over there, man. They're all pedophiles anyway. And Andrew said to me, he goes, you just heard that clip. It's kind of taken out of context. And fair enough, maybe it is. But if you view the war that way, even if you're against it, you certainly wouldn't have the same feelings that, say, I have. You know, one of the things I was thinking about, I'll give this away if we do debate, that I would have asked Crowder, or I would ask Andrew Wilson, is like, are there any things a president could do that just on moral grounds alone, you'd go, I can't support this anymore? So like, let's just say hypothetically, let's say Donald Trump, all other things being equal, he ordered 20,000 abortions. I don't even mean voluntary abortions. I mean involuntary. I mean, all abortions are involuntary in some sense, but the mother didn't even want them. He just ordered 20,000 abortions. I think you'd all concede we can't support him after that. And no more of this like, oh, the Democrats are worse. It's like just on basic moral grounds you can't support. So okay, that's kind of how I view this. Like, I don't think I'm against abortion because it's murder. I'm also against killing 168 little schoolgirls because it's murder. So there's that element of it.
Right.
There's also the element that it's fucking treason, dude. Like it's okay, it's not literal treason. Obama having Jolani at the White House and giving foreign aid to Syria is literally treason. That is literally treason.
Yep.
By the way, you know, they love bringing up that Iran killed our Marines, which is not exactly true. It was like groups in Lebanon who were friendly with Iran killed our Marines. Iran built all the roadside bombs that killed our boys. And also not exactly true. If you look into them, they were produced in Iraq. Now they were used by some Shiite groups that were linked to, that are like friendly with Iran, although we were partners with the closest, to
Right.
Iran. I know you know this stuff. But, there was also a Sunni insurgency that we were dealing with for the most part. Jolani brags about how he was a member, how he was killing our boys in Iraq, that he was in Fallujah doing the fighting. He was a member of the insurgency. Trump has him at the White House.
Right.
Not a peep out of all of these guys who are so mad about this stuff. So there's that like kind of treasonous element. You launched a war of aggression and slaughtered people on behalf of a foreign country. Like it's not just the practical. I think there's also just like a moral argument that like we can't be a part of that. We can't excuse that away.
Yeah,
that's how I feel.
For me, it's less about morality, only because, and I know probably your audience is gonna not love this, but I think that when a president engages in a war, these are things that do happen. It's horrible, it's tragic, but there is some truth to the fact that if we're going to conduct any foreign policy, it probably will involve military kinetic action. If that happens, then people will die. That's what happens in a war. For me, the question is more about it, and to the larger point, who is the war for? And I think that it's not even so much about the morality of people dying in the war, whether they're civilian casualties or military casualties. It's the whole premise of MAGA and America First is America first. And that is what animated the whole movement at 16. It was in contradistinction to Jeb Bush and the Bush dynasty and the legacy of Iraq. And to me, those are just the fundamental pillars. And, not to keep going back to it, but Crowder said to me, it's a purity test. He said, what could a president do to win your vote? I'm like, keep the promises they made. They said no new wars. Here's your new war. They said mass deportations. We're not getting them. That's not a big ask. And what's more, let's be honest, the war in Iran is not like some isolated event. People are trying to analyze and they say, well, it's about energy dominance with China. Venezuela and Iran are part of this. We're boxing China in so they don't get their oil. And, without even getting too much into that, it's complete context denial, which is that we've been conducting a foreign policy for 30 years where we systematically went into Iraq, Syria, Libya, Iran, all these countries to decimate them. And it actually doesn't fit a very clear through line or a narrative for American interest. You had all these different arguments. It's about spreading democracy. It's about chemical weapons. It's about nuclear weapons. The clear through line is these are all adversaries of Israel. This is part of their plan to terraform the Middle East in such a way where they have no rivals. And this is, by the way, what they wanted and that no other president gave them. They wanted it under Bush, Obama, Trump. They tried to get it even under Biden when they provoked Iran a couple of times in 2024. And Trump finally gave them, the ideological neocons and Israel, what they've been wanting basically for 50 years, ever since the Islamic Revolution. And so you say, like, not only did you not deliver America first, but you repudiated America first with your allegiance to the biggest threat to it. And all these people are acting like, oh, well, so what? It's not a big deal. It's only 2 weeks. It's only 30 days. It's only 15 casualties. And you say that's ignoring the bigger picture. He change sides. Like he's with the enemy, giving them everything they ever wanted.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, dude. I mean, all of the never Trumpers, all of the never Trumpers. You know, I saw someone was posting today that National Review Never Trump issue. All these guys, Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro, and all the guys who are championing this move with Donald Trump, they were all the people who said they would never vote for Donald Trump for moral reasons and all this stuff. And yeah, dude, it is pretty hard to ignore that this is the continuation of the clean break strategy. We're just watching it. I mean, they all said it in their own words for so many decades. You could just go back and read what they wrote. And we're to believe that this is like coincidentally the 7th country on Wesley Clark's list. It happens to be, and coincidentally, it's the entire Israel lobby that pushed him into it. I will say it's been, I mean, look, maybe this is a major theme anytime I feel like talking to you. But it is crazy how much the Overton window has moved on this. Where now, I don't know if you saw this, but both John Kerry, Hillary Clinton, those are two, there were a few others, but I mean, these are two, the Democratic secretaries of state and presidential nominees who came out and just said exactly what you said. They go, Netanyahu was always trying to get all of us to do that. Like this is, this is just open now. It's just like, this is the obvious thing. It's like, well, yeah, we all know Netanyahu's trying to get us into these wars, but you don't do it. You give them some, you don't give them all of them, you know? And then we're to look back at Obama as if he stood up to the Israel lobby or something like that. It's like he gave him Libya and Syria. So like he didn't really stand. But yes, even he did say, we won't do this one. Even George W. Bush stood up to Dick Cheney and the neocons on this one. And it was because of the military realities of going after Iran. It's been interesting to watch. I know, like I've seen some of your coverage of this, and I think both of us, we're trying to be fair about this. We were both kind of going, after the 6-day war, I certainly was questioning because, well, frankly, there were some people who I admire very much who did get a little out over their skis. I think Tucker and Jeffrey Sachs and Mearsheimer probably all said variations of like, if you attack their nuclear sites, they will shut down the strait and they will hit our bases. And that turned out not to be true. Like and you look at that and you go, huh, maybe they will just roll over. Maybe they will just capitulate. I mean, I don't think so, but I'd still warn against this war because look of all these potential catastrophic outcomes. And then we launched this one and it's like, oh yeah, we're here now. This is what everyone was warning against. And I don't know where you see this going, but I think, you know, I'm not saying like Professor Pape is right and it's guaranteed that we're in the escalation trap. I hope Donald Trump just walks away at some point. It does seem though, at least right now, we're at this very dangerous position where the absolute best thing Donald Trump could do is just stop it and come home. And the problem is that there's just, that's it. And that's the end of his presidency, man. I mean, there's just no say. And so like, I saw Joe Kent, you know, he comes on and he goes, you know, Mr. President he's the only one strong enough to leave and save his presidency and say it was a win and all this. And I'm like, man, I hope he's listening to him. Like, that's who you should listen to. This guy who looks like a He-Man doll and is your sir, yes, sir. And okay. But if me and you are just speaking honestly, that's admitting total defeat. His approval rating will be in the 20s in the next couple months. If after this, that's all he has to show for it, is that Iran is transformed into a global power who now has this ace in the hole. They can close the strait anytime they want. That's a disaster.
If Donald Trump does that, I have a very, very strong feeling that Israel is going to nuke Iran.
And Donald Trump, and that's still his best option. And so, but he has not even begun to accept that that's his best option and that he's going to lose like this. So again, I think this week he's going to escalate again. Then what's Iran's response to that going to be? So essentially, the best case scenario is that Donald Trump's presidency is ruined. That's how I view it. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I do think that we're sort of trapped. That's really always been the whole conceit, is that Israel, you know, we talk about it, people think we're using these terms loosely. I use them very precisely. They're dragging us into the war. And that means it's this step-by-step process where each individual step, it becomes more unlikely that we're able to extricate ourselves from it. That's sort of the whole point, is like, it's sort of slowly and then all at once, you're in this conflict. nobody from the very beginning would say we're going to go into a ground war and fight 90 million people in this huge country. But it starts with the industrial sabotage, the cyber attacks, nuclear assassinations. We're going to shoot down their missiles, engage the proxies, and this is how it's gone step by step over 2 years until now. The 12-day war became this 60, 75-day war, whatever we're in. And I think that the way it's shaking out, if you want to get into the details, is there's 2 sticking points still. And that is the first one, which has been the one from the very beginning, which is enrichment. And the United States says you cannot have enrichment, not at a low level. There can never be a sunset clause. There needs to be a permanent moratorium and no enrichment at all. And why does Trump in particular have to insist upon this? Because he tore up the JCPOA. And what was the problem with the JCPOA? It sunsetted. It allowed them to enrich at low levels. And then after 10 years, it went away. So if Trump were to get anything less than zero enrichment, then he looks like an idiot. He looks like he got a worse deal or a deal just as good after we decimated them. So you go, it's been 10 years of maximum pressure, and we came crawling back to beg for the same deal back. It's a non-starter. So conversely, Iran says our right to enrich is as sacred as the sovereignty over our soil. They equate enrichment with sovereignty for obvious reasons, because it's their only deterrent against Israel and Washington engaging in this regime change, which is existential for the regime. So there's no wiggle room for either side. There's no coming down from those. And then the second one since the war is the Strait. And the United States cannot accept that Iran gains the Strait. Again, after we hit them with everything, now they have this strategic choke point. They have 5 times more oil under their control than before the war. And then Iran, likewise, they can't give up the Strait. Why would they? They can close it. We can't take it back. And that is their deterrent against a future conflict, because that is how they impose a cost, not only on us, but the whole world, if we were to try to. And the 2 issues are related, because if we don't get the centrifuges in this go around, Iran knows we're coming back for round 3 to mow the grass, trim the grass. We're going to come back in, bomb the stockpile, the centrifuges, whatever. How do they prevent another?
Does anybody else feel like this is the exact Iraq playbook? Weapons of mass destruction. The weapons of mass destruction were never there. The intel was based off our greatest allies' intel. I feel like we are going down the exact same road that we went down in Iraq in 2003. And I feel like nobody is calling it for what it is.
U.S.-Israel crack at it. We got to have the Strait under our control so that everybody knows we go back in. It's $7 gas. It's a global meltdown. The UAE, Bahrain, Saudi, they're done. They're finished after that. So those 2 issues are going to be the impasse. I don't see budging on either of them. It's just irreconcilable, intractable differences. And so I think you're totally right. At least in the short term, there's going to be a return to fighting. And then on a longer timeline, look, the thing that people never keep in mind, unlike the U.S. and North Korea or the U.S. and Venezuela or Cuba, they don't have a country like Israel sabotaging diplomacy and provoking through deception and lobbying for escalation. So even if you get someone like Trump that says, all right, we're just going to call it, I'm going to take the hit. Well, is there someone you forgot to ask? We need permission, actually, and they're always going to sabotage it. So I think you're right. I don't know that it's a certainty, but yeah, there's very few options where this works out for us.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I think I agree. It's not a certainty. And kind of the thing that makes it not a certainty is that Donald Trump himself is such a wild card. And like you could see him just spinning it as how great it was, but I don't think anyone will believe him. But I think you're right about that. Particularly like the political incentives for Donald Trump are so bad. And then the survival incentives for Iran. And you could really watch.
Donald Trump doesn't give a fuck about what happens after he's out of office, because once he's out of office, he's done. and it's somebody else's problem. And somebody else is going to have to pick up the pieces, and he doesn't give a fuck what kind of mess he makes on the way out.
From the 12-day war to this war, how much that you flipped the incentive structure. And it's like, in the sense that if someone comes to my house with a gun and they pull a gun on me and they go, they're like, give me, and I'm like, okay, hey, just calm down. What do you want? I'll give you my money, blah, blah. And then they go, no, I'm here for your kids. He goes, well, that just flipped the incentive, right? Like the first time my incentive was, let me give you my money so that nobody gets hurt. But like, if you're here for my kids, then I have to make a move. And yeah, I might get shot in the process, but it doesn't matter. And it's like, it's kind of been that. Like, in a way, we're there for their kids now. There's a parallel to us killing so many of their kids. But I agree with you. I think that there's a real question right now, and I worry about it because I've seen the hubris of leadership in DC is really, it's unbelievable. And it's unbelievable how many of these people, because they have so much power, convince themselves that they're such geniuses and can figure all of this out. But even the damage that this war has done so far, we don't really know. Like the Strait of Hormuz, I know you read the news just like I do. Since the blockade of the blockade, it's only slowed down the number of ships going through, like total number of ships. We've now been like 2 months of where 20% of the world's oil and a huge percent of the world's fertilizer have been completely shut down. We probably won't exactly find out how much that impacts the global economy for another month or two, but it already might be really bad. But then the fact that, like, as you mentioned, gas prices here are already up. And it must be something for someone like you, who was a hardcore Trump supporter in 2016, and not just a hardcore Trump supporter, but you were it was like your coming of age kind of like, right. I was 18 when 9/11 happened. You were, I think, 18 in 2016. So like right around, like, that's like the big thing that's going on as you're becoming a man. And to watch some of the quotes that he's had where they ask him about the pressure it's putting on the American economy, and Trump just straight up goes like, I wasn't thinking about that. I'm thinking about this war. I'm thinking they can't have nuclear weapons. I don't care about. And you're like, dude, man, if that wasn't an ad for the Democrats, I don't know. I mean, you guys could just run that and win the House easy on this.
All 16 of our intelligence agencies were in agreement that Iran did not have a nuclear weapon, nor were they working towards a nuclear weapon. Every single one of our intelligence agencies said no. And Donald Trump did it anyway.
It's pretty wild to say.
Yeah, seriously. And, in fairness, it's a horrible, stinking quote. You do have to consider it, though, from his perspective, that obviously it's a game of chicken. And it's a question of who's going to blink first. And Iran is betting on the fact that they have more leverage over us, more pressure, because it's a midterm election year. Gas prices, inflation is going to hurt Republicans. Excuse me. And so I think Trump almost has to telegraph, like, I'm irrational. I don't care. I'm erratic.
Yeah.
You don't have. So I can be sympathetic to that angle, but obviously it's not good politics to say, they ask him, they say, did you think about the financial prosperity of Americans? No, I didn't think about their financial security at all. I only care about whether Iran's nuclear. So it's a terrible thing. But, with that being said, as far as the damage is concerned, people don't realize it's over after this. I really believe that I saw on the news today, they said it could be, in the New York Times, in the hundreds of billions of dollars, maybe even the trillions of dollars. And the reason being, especially in America, I talked about this on my show, the only thing that is driving economic growth right now is the AI boom.
Mm-hmm.
It is the purchasing of chips. It is the construction of these data centers. That is most of it. Like, we're not even doing so much commercial real estate, the conventional stuff. It's all the data centers. And since this war started, I think the number was 50% of all planned and in progress data centers have been paused. Mm-hmm. And that is all the real estate boom in the country. That's all the construction. That's all the development. And the reason being is because all the AI runs on electricity. That's what makes it economical, is that you have cheap and plentiful energy. And so if you have a huge energy shock, which we haven't even fully felt the effects of, that's something that lags behind
Yeah.
because, you know, the oil goes out of the strait and then it takes time. I think the last shipment of Persian Gulf oil arrived in Europe and Asia 4 weeks ago. So there's this month-long delay. Then there's rationing. Then let's say the Strait of Hormuz opens. How many ships go through? There's a lot of ships stuck in the Persian Gulf, and they're not all going to go out at once. It's going to take time even for those to get out, and then, you know, for all the supply chains to recalibrate. So it hasn't even hit yet. And then once it does, like you said, there's going to be this ripple effect. It's not just the oil, it's the fertilizer. And then the energy and oil also affects groceries because it all goes on a truck. It all goes on, you know, transportation. So there's going to then be a following economic correction or a trailing economic correction that follows the energy shock. And then that's just game over. And to me, it's less so that he said the financial security, whatever, because it's like, you kind of understand why he says that. To me, it's he said at the exact same time that this was all playing out in February. In January and February, they were telling the hardcore Republican base, we're done with mass deportations. We're not saying it anymore. We're not doing it. The surge in Minneapolis is over. They said we're only now going after criminal illegal aliens. And moreover, they got a new DHS secretary. They got Kristi Noem out, and they said the new policy is we're not doing patrols. We're not going to go in people's houses. We're not doing these big operations in the cities. We surge, 5,000 CBP and ICE. And they said the reason is too unpopular for the midterms, way too unpopular. We're going to kill with Latinos. It's like, okay, so then you started the most unpopular war in modern history, which causes inflation and high gas prices. Isn't that what got Biden and Kamala to lose 2 years ago? So you say, I see what you're doing for them.
Yeah.
Why can't you do that for us? SAVE Act, can't do it. Mass deportations, can't do it. All these things that the voters are told, politically impossible. You got to be practical. Think about the political realities of the Democrats. Oh, war with Iran? We need a $1.5 trillion military budget, and we're going to kill the supreme leader, and we're going to get $6 gas. It doesn't even matter. And that's when you realize it is still the uni party. That's kind of the conceit, is like MAGA's dead. Whatever Trump was doing in 2016 is over. That like outsider challenge, it's not the same. He's part of the establishment. So to me, that's like the big picture when you really realize how it all works.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's an undeniably great point that you're like, look, mass deportations would have been very messy, very unpopular. And in fact, some people might die. Some people might get hurt. It's like, yeah, all of that is true about the war in Iran times 10, and it wasn't even your promise. Right. It was you promised the opposite. Yeah. So how about keep a promise that's unpopular instead of, but personally, I actually think there's a way that like deportations could have been done that would have remained popular. Because in fact, when Donald Trump came in 2024, for the first time in my life, super majorities of the American people supported mass deportations. And I remember talking about this on the show a lot, and I was like, look, that is true, but it's also a number on a poll. And if they get messy, that number will go down. And so you got to kind of like, you got to factor all of that into it. But I mean, I guess that's part of the reason why I'm so upset about this too. And why it gets frustrating when people are arguing, but you can't support the Democrats because they're so awful. And you're like, yeah, I know. That's the whole point, man. The whole point is that you had this opportunity in 2024, like a huge opportunity in 2016, but then in 2024, in some ways, a much bigger opportunity because, well, frankly, of Joe Biden. And the Joe Biden years really pushed the country to the right on social issues, on immigration issues. I mean, people kind of forget this. I think we talked about this last time you were here. But like in my entire life, I'm 43. The only time the culture's ever moved to the right was under Joe Biden.
Yeah.
It has never happened, including under Trump's. Under Trump's first term, the culture moved far to the left from where it had been. We became the Pussy Hat March and, safe space country and all this shit. And it wasn't until Joe Biden that actually, as a reaction against him. But so then Donald Trump comes in, wins all the swing states, wins the popular vote for the first time. The Democrats have like a 22% approval rating. They're just defeated. This was a time when you could have done some awesome shit for the country and really ridden that wave. And look, as you said, this is not, it's like the things Donald Trump has out loud said things that should only be said on your show. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like Donald Trump goes, the Adelsons give me hundreds of millions of dollars and they love Israel more than they love America. And they come in every day and want me to do things for Israel. And I always do it. Like, I thought that's supposed to be an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory here. Dude, like where, and you know, to your point, it's honestly like just demonstrably true that at every level, they're very good. Like the lobby is very good at getting, because if you remember, you made the point about no nuclear enrichment at all. But Donald Trump, in the negotiations before the 12-day war, when he attacked him in the middle of negotiate, or Israel attacked him in the middle of negotiations, who knows exactly what happened there. He had made a couple comments about how like, no, I'm not demanding no enrichment whatsoever. And then all of the like Mark Levin, they're very good at this. They get on him and they go, well, Mr. President, if you're really tough and you are so tough, then you'll demand no enrichment. And that's, you could see where Trump's like susceptible to that and go, yeah, that is more badass, you know, that is, but that's the poison pill, man. It's like that little one thing just got 2 wars out of it, because even though it seems like a subtle distinction, it's like, no, that's the biggest distinction in the world, because you're telling them they can't have a legal civilian nuclear program. And then of course, as you mentioned, that's their deterrent that they're relying on. So yeah, I completely agree with you with that. Hey guys, let's take a moment to thank our sponsor for today's show. And this sponsor is very near and dear to my heart. It is Healthy Hibernation, which is the children's book written by my beautiful wife, Lauren Smith. It's a really sweet book. It's very wholesome and light and fun for the kids. And it's just got like a positive message about eating healthy, which is one of the challenges for parents today, to navigate a world where your supermarket is filled with poison in brightly colored boxes that your kids all want to eat. And so the idea of this is a book for little ones to kind of start a conversation about eating healthy. It is available at Amazon. We've been blown away by the response so far. So thank you guys so much. If you have children or you have anyone in your life who has children, please pick up a copy of Healthy Hibernation by Lauren Smith over at Amazon.com. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Prolon. A lot of you have probably heard about these fasting diets. That's a big thing these days. People are doing these diets where they give up food altogether for long periods of time, and there's a lot of benefits in them. The problem is that you have to give up food, which is something I certainly wouldn't be willing to do. But now Prolon has solved this problem. Prolon is a revolutionary plant-based nutrition program that nourishes the body while tricking cells into thinking that they're fasting. So they basically keep your body in a fasting state, but you don't actually have to give up food. And this all starts with Prolon's 5-day program. Soups, snacks, and beverages, all designed to keep your body in a fasting state. So you get all the benefits of a fasting diet without having to give up food. That's the idea. To learn more, go to prolonlife.com/POTP. That way you can get 15% off the 5-day nutrition program. So that's prolonlife.com/POTP for 15% off your 5-day nutrition program. Highly recommend you check it out, guys. All right, let's get back into the show. Now, as far as your point about, well, this is part of negotiating in a war, I get your point. I get where he does have to seem like a madman. I guess the problem is not so much just that he said it. The problem is that he actually did it. Like the problem is that he actually did sacrifice the economic well-being of Americans for Israel. And not, look, I mean, as you know, the WMD thing is as much bullshit with Iran as it was with Iraq. This was never over their nuclear threat, and they wanted to overthrow them before they were even before they even had a nuclear program. This is always just the thing that they know will sell with the American people. They've done focus group testing on this. I think it was Frank Luntz. It was like back in the 90s when they were focus group testing on Scott Horton taught me about this. A great note on this. But so they were doing these focus groups about the war in Iraq, and they were like, hey, how do you feel about us fighting this war to liberate the people of Kuwait? And Americans are like, what? And then they go, what about a nuclear threat? And everyone's like, all right, well, that is something we'd have to go take care of. This is why we all know what this is about. And it's not even about Iran. It's about Lebanon. And it's about Iran supporting Hezbollah, and Israel wants to take southern Lebanon. Very coincidentally, they've been taking southern Lebanon during this war, you know? And it's like, look, however you feel about that, which I'm against it, but however you feel about that, like you said, it is it's treasonous in spirit to say, in order to help them achieve this goal, we're going to sacrifice our people. And what could be more the antithesis of the fundamental Trump promise, which was that, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to sacrifice America on behalf of the world or some global ambition, because that doesn't really matter to us.
Right. Well, and, I think the original appeal of Trump is this idea that he was going to do the things that were
I'm going to address this comment head on, Goose. I am an independent thinker. I am no longer part of the MAGA movement because I woke up to the bullshit and propaganda. I am willing to work with the left to find common ground, to get big money out of politics so our politicians work for the American people instead of work for lobbyists, foreign governments, special interests. Those are the kinds of things that I want to work on. So I'm not telling anybody what to think. I'm just giving my take. And if anybody agrees or disagrees with my take, that's on them. But I don't expect, or nobody has to agree with how I feel. But I can tell you that I feel lied to and manipulated by the Trump administration after I voted for this guy 3 times. And I remember when I had to hide the fact that I was a Trump supporter because I was afraid I was going to get fired from my job. So that's how long I've been around supporting Trump. And I no longer support him. So to me, that is free thinking and not relying on the GOP talking points and the mainstream media talking points. But you could perceive it however you want to perceive it, Goose.
popular, but that were necessary for the country.
Yeah.
And he would always say that. Even 40 years ago, there was a famous interview, I think it was in the 70s, where he said, I don't know that I would ever run for president because, the things that you need to do would be unpopular and you can't always be the popular guy and so on and so forth. And it's like, getting back to the generational coalition in 2024 that won this election. I remember the exuberance when we won in 24, when Trump won in 24. They were calling it a golden age. It was RFK Jr., Elon Musk. You had all this political capital to fix a lot of things that would have been unpopular to do, like Doge, cutting the deficit and cutting the debt, mass deportations, building the wall, all those things they promised to do. And they squandered that political capital, the $7 gas, the inflation, unpopular, on the war. And you think about, what if in an alternate timeline, they took the $200 billion from the big, beautiful bill for DHS, and they actually did mass deportations and followed through. Trump's approval rating would go down. People would die. It would get ugly. But the right wing would rally behind him. They would say, because we're fighting for America. They would say, this is existential. Getting these illegal aliens out, it is on some level about taking control back from the Democrats. It is about taking control back from foreigners, putting Americans first. And so you'd say, we feel good about this. We feel good about the conflict. It's ugly. There's going to be a cost. There would have been inflation. The Wall Street Journal was always warning about that, saying you deport all these illegal aliens, labor cost goes up, demand goes down, you're going to get some inflation. But people would have been on board because of what it is. Same thing with the indictments, like you mentioned earlier about Obama with Tulsi Gabbard in June last year, or the Clintons for that matter, or any of them. People really would have been there for it, but they squandered all those things in pursuit of another country's priorities and foreign policy or even domestic policy. And there's one thing that stood out to me when this conversation was happening. When we launched this war in Iran, all the Trump supporters had to defend it, this cadre of influencers. And I remember there was one line they kept using. They kept saying, I can't believe we squandered this generational coalition. The generational coalition was supposed to be about immigration and all this other stuff. And you almost want to grab these people by the head, by their ears.
The generational coalition was because none of us wanted foreign wars. None of us wanted to give our money to foreign governments and foreign lobbies. That is what the coalition was all about.
And shake them and say, they don't care about those issues.
Yeah.
They're not squandering it. They're spending it. This is what it was for, you know, and in the mind of like, and I know you're a libertarian, so I think, you know, we can kind of see it for what it is. There are a lot of these heritage Americans, white nationalists, immigration restrictionists, and in their mind, they're on the team. The Twitter posters are in the White House, and Trump is looking out for them so they don't encounter diversity that makes them uncomfortable in their neighborhood. And so this whole thing was about, you know, getting those illegals out and making America a Norman Rockwell painting. And you want to say, no, you were the mark. The generational coalition was banking, Tim Mellon, tech, Elon Musk, Andreessen Horowitz. It was the donor class, which was 60% of the donations for Trump in 24, inverse from 16, to get a 10% corporate tax cut, a war in Iran, annexation of the West Bank, southern Lebanon, Gaza, moratorium on AI regulation, bring Palantir and Little Tech and PayPal Mafia into the White House and get them all these contracts. That was actually the purpose of the generational coalition. And then, oh, you're sour grapes and going home. They don't care. They got what they wanted from you. You voted it into office. Now they confer all the privileges on the donors. This idea that it was, hey, get your pitchforks and torches. We're taking the country back. That was a scam to get you to vote for this.
Isn't that interesting? Nick saying, get your pitchforks and torches. We're taking the country back. When on January 6th, he was out there with a megaphone screaming for people to go into the Capitol and ignore the police, yet he was never charged with anything. I wonder why.
Interest-based agenda. So that's the part where, to me, it's like you just don't understand what politics is.
Yeah. No, I think listen, as a libertarian, that's exactly right. It's just that you don't understand the nature of this game, and you've got this conception of you're on a team or this, and none of this is real. And look, man, I mean, I understand people out of desperation, people wanting to believe in something. It's much what we're asking people to swallow is much grimmer than what Steven Crowder is asking them to swallow. And so there's a part where I understand people not wanting that to be the case. I probably was to some degree guilty of this, although I was always very guarded because I knew, you know, the Trump track record. But it was like, hey, look, they actually did try to throw him in jail this time. They actually really did maybe even tried to assassinate, you know, who knows exactly. And he's coming in and, hey, he's putting Tulsi Gabbard at DNI now. And like, hey, his son is tweeting at me that we're going to keep all the neocons out. You're like, all right, let's go. But this is almost what's frustrating with some of those guys. Like, hey, I'm down to be on the team. You just got to give me something, like something that's a reasonable, there's something in it for us. But man, when you think back, as you're saying this, it reminds me, which I think a lot of people forget this, but one of the huge appeals of Donald Trump, I mean, really, this was up there with one of the things that he said that people loved in 2016, was that he basically made the argument that because he's rich, he's uniquely in this position where I don't need any of these donor monies. Now, this was one of the first broken promises of Trump's, and everyone just kind of let it go because, again, I think people were kind of desperate. They had never had anything like Donald Trump before. And it's very easy to start making excuses to yourself. Yeah, whatever. He'll take some money, but he's still fucking he's still pissing off CNN. Yeah, I know he lies all the time, but like, whatever. He lies about little stuff, you know, whatever the kind of coping mechanisms are. But he used to openly say,
hey guys, do me a favor. If you're not watching me on YouTube, the YouTube channel is Free Our Republic. And it is called that because until our politicians are not bought and paid for by foreign lobbies and foreign interests, we will not have sovereignty in this country. So freeing the republic is the first thing that we need to do to regain our country. So if you could shoot me a like, a subscribe, comment, thumbs up, whatever, anything to help me break out into this algorithm, I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Like Marco Rubio, he used to say Sheldon Adelson wants to make Marco Rubio his puppet. I don't need his money. I won't be that guy. And it is kind of amazing to go, he just went from being that to just being like, that's the whole thing. Like essentially the whole operation is like an Adelson op, and he openly admits it. And do you remember in 2016, when he said the thing, and I don't even know how like red pilled you were yet at this point, but he had said, there was one point where Donald Trump had said, just like off the top of his head, as he typically would do in an interview, where they asked him where he stood on Israel Palestine. And you remember back in 2016, this was one of the most fun parts about Trump's run in 2016, is that a lot of times they would ask Donald Trump a question and he would kind of go like, and you could tell that in that moment he was figuring out what his policy was on this issue. Like it was like remember when Chris Matthews goes like, so you're pro-life, and he's like, I'd have to say I'm the most pro-life there is. And he goes, so should a woman go to jail for murder if she aborts? So and he goes, I'd say yeah, you know, and like that's not even the position of pro-lifers in America. Right. You know what I mean? Which is like an interesting thing we could get into, but like that's actually not most pro-lifers, but that's a very, very fringe view, even amongst pro-life. But he doesn't know. He's just so they ask him about Israel Palestine, and in his typical Trump way, he's just going on instinct and saying what he thinks. So he just goes, I'd say we should be neutral. We should be neutral, and we should stay out of it. We should be friends with it. But saying you should be neutral to the Israel lobby is like saying we should.
It's okay, because everybody starts somewhere. If Nick Fuentes wasn't a Fed, he wouldn't have pled the Fifth when Congress asked him if he was a rat. And that tells you all you need to know. So if you're one of those Fuentes fangirls, I don't know what to tell you. He's gay anyway.
Eat Jewish babies. Like there's literally no, you saying we should be Adolf Hitler if you say we should be neutral in the Israel Palestine. And then he got a lot of heat for it. And then you remember he went to AIPAC.
Yeah.
And he gave this speech. This is when I started taking him very seriously politically, because I was like, it's one thing to be able to move a lot of people in Alabama, or it's one thing to be able to talk to red state America, working class people. It is a different thing to be able to get a standing ovation from the Israel lobby. You know, that's like, that means a lot in Washington, D.C. And so he goes there, and how does he win them over? Well, he's Donald Trump. So first he goes, Obama makes very stupid deals. I believe in smart deals. And the worst deal ever made was the JCPOA, the Iran deal. I don't even know if he knew JCPOA, but he said the Iran deal, and they're standing ovation for that. So anyway, just reminding people that originally, at least openly, Donald Trump's instinct was to be neutral and not be involved. That got the Israel lobby to attack him, and to get them off his back, he promised them he would tear up the JCPOA,
right?
Which is kind of crazy that, and here we find ourselves all these years later in the war that was prevented by that agreement.
Well, you're right. And those are two things that I bring up on my show that people forget, because people say like, oh, well, Trump has always been pro-Israel. That's always kind of been part of the deal. And it's like, no, it really wasn't. I mean, in 2015, early 2016, you're right. I remember that interview well. And he said, we're going to be neutral. We're going to treat both sides fairly. And he went, I don't know if it was AIPAC or RJC, but he, like you said, he said that thing about Rubio, I think in December 15, where he said, oh, well, he's going to take your money. He's your puppet. I'm not going to take your money. And I even said this in 24. And at the time, I know a lot of people didn't take it seriously because it didn't sound like real or like concrete. I was saying like, well, he's going to bring us to war in Iran. He's not going to do the deportations. But I also said that the prospect is different. Like, or rather, the proposition of Trumpism is different because, like you said, and this is the most important thing, when you go back to 16, Trump said, I'm rich, I'm a billionaire, I'll self-fund my campaign. That is why I can fix America. Like, there's a very clear logical chain where he says, the system is broken. The politicians are all talk, no action. They never deliver real victories. Why? Because they are controlled by the donors. I alone can fix it because I'm so rich. I'll self-fund my campaign. I will run the government like a business. I'll hire and fire at will. And that's why I can bypass all of the gridlock, all these problems that have prevented real change. And that was another big aspect of it, as he would say, it's not just going to be these like political wins. He said, no, we're going to deliver a real win. He said, I'm literally going to take this country and make it great again. And what you're getting at 16 is totally different than from 24, where they're like, you go to these people and say, well, he said staple green cards to diplomas. He said we're going to bomb Iran, basically. He said there's really no plan to do mass deportations. And people would say, you know, once you get past all that golden age stuff, they say, yeah, well, it's going to be better than a Democrat. And you go, okay, but like lesser two evils, better than a Democrat. Wasn't the whole point that he was going to like break the system? I'll never forget that debate. I don't know if it was the South Carolina debate or maybe the one before that, but there's that viral clip where he goes, you know, we needed tickets for the television audience. You can't get them. You want to know who's in the audience? Donors, special interest. And people, if you watch that clip now, everyone in the comments says, oh, now I get why he got elected. Like, now I get, I'm left wing, I'm Democrat. Now I see it. And it's like, yeah, that's what created the cult of personality. That's what created diehard Trump supporters. And it's like, Tucker points this out. It's like Animal Farm. It's like the revolution has betrayed itself. Now he's just like the others. And that's where you say, this is now dead. This wave has crested. It's not dynamic anymore. Now we need to look for the next wave because this will only disappoint us in the future. So that's a very good point about the self-funding. And you're right. Almost nobody talks about it.
Yeah, it just kind of went away. But look, I mean, I think that was also, I guess, kind of part of the disconnect of where me and you are on this versus where like Crowder is on this, where it's like, look, it's very easy, especially for guys like us. It's very easy to have your own narcissism, you know, fuck with you. Cause it's just the world there's a camera in front of us. We're on, you get a lot of people watching your thing and you can feel like you're an important person. But like at the end of the day, the truth is that me and you aren't really going to determine anything that happens here. You'd be like, oh, you guys cost us the midterm. No, the Trump administration cost us the midterm. There's nothing I could say that would change the reality on the ground. You know, like this is what it is. But I think in some way, people also don't understand how you.
Donald Trump selling out his base for AIPAC and the Republican Jewish Coalition and Mark Levin and Ben Shapiro and all the never Trumpers. That's what lost you the midterms. What happened to Charlie Kirk is why you lost the midterms. And that's something that you have to reckon with yourself. But he's such a fucking egomaniac that it won't even register.
Uniquely positioned Donald Trump was, like, there are so many factors, so many stars that aligned for Donald Trump to do what he did in 2016 and in 2024. Like, he was the most famous guy in the world. He was the rich guy. He was so brash. He was so camera ready. Like, there's just like all these things that come together. Like, Republicans have won 2 popular votes in the 21st century. Okay, like to go back to the third, you have to go back to like when I was 15 or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's really bad. George W. Bush, they won in 2004, which was, if you can, you know, because I'm a little bit older than you, like 2004 was 5 years after the 1990s. Okay, it was a different country than we are today. And we were in a war. And even though the war wasn't going good, it was like, don't go against the president in the middle of a war was still kind of a big thing. Since then, no Republicans have won the popular vote. Donald Trump got it this last time. people do not understand the gap between what Donald Trump has versus what Marco Rubio has, what JD Vance has.
Right.
It was already a huge ask for them to carry this coalition forward. Like, it's over, dude. It has nothing to do with how me or you feel. That's it. None of these guys can win. This administration has an approval rating about where George W. Bush's was after 2 disastrous wars and an economic collapse. This isn't a matter of me or you. It's like, no, listen, dude, the only option here is that another outsider emerges, which is possible. No one would have picked Donald Trump at this point. We'd be in 2014. No one would have picked Donald Trump was going to be president in 2016. So, like, there are maybe someone will emerge. And Crowder kept saying to you, yeah, but that comes with risks. Yeah.
Right.
Nothing doesn't come with risks. Your plan comes with the risk of your plan is that either Gavin Newsom or AOC will be president. You want to just say, put the blinders on, forget that we just launched a war for a foreign country?
I think Nick is planning to run in 26. I think that's why he's playing coy, and he says there's a ground game in the works, but he can't talk about it. Any politician knows that he is toxic and cannot be associated with him in public. So I don't think any politicians are going to work secretly behind the scenes with Nick in case that information gets leaked to the press. So I think Nick is planning a presidential run in 2026.
Which is the most hated country in the world, which is a country that the American people have rejected, do not want this. You want to blame the critics of it for the loss? Okay. Let's if we had time machines, let's run a different experiment where me and you both get on board. We stay on board with the administration. We'll just go down in flames anyway.
Right.
It's not going to change anything.
Well, and, I would say he kept saying, if we burn it all down, go for the Democrats, etc. He said, there's this big risk then that the Democrats are going to win. And I said, well, let's think about possibilities. So if we have someone from the administration run like Vance or Rubio, let's think about what Vance and Rubio would do that Trump would not. If we can agree that Trump is unsatisfactory, he's betrayed many of the promises, and at the minimum, like you even said earlier, to the extent that he's doing anything, he's not solving it.
Yeah.
Deporting 500,000 people, let's say that's the number. Is that a drop in the bucket even? If Biden imported 10 million and you deport 1 million, you're not even like net negative from where Biden was, let alone where we were before Biden was elected. So he didn't solve it. But like you said, Trump has this cult of personality. He uniquely wields the people as like sort of a distinct political force. Rubio and Vance, they don't have that cult of personality. They don't have control over the party. They don't have that popular support. And what's more, they don't have that like independent mind. Like Trump created this political revolution. He is an outsider. He does actually even have, you could argue, his own ideology, this like pro-protection, anti-war, nativist sort of thing. So are Vance and Rubio going to be better than Trump? And if so, how? How are they going to stand up to the Israel lobby? How are they going to be more immigration restrictionist? I don't think anyone would really believe that. And so you either get a continuation of the, if it's even possible they win because they're attached to this administration, you either get a continuation of this, which we all recognize is not a solution for anything. The best people say is it's worse than, or rather it's better than total destruction under Democrats. Or they say something like, well, it's buying us time. It's letting us have some sort of like salutary neglect, like the Democrats aren't killing us with censorship and debanking. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario is it's a Democrat. And so you say, that's a scenario where there's no winning option.
Yeah.
Like victory is not a possibility on your timeline. So what you're doing is you're playing not to lose. You're hoping that we don't get the worst thing. We don't get the worst defeat condition, but you're not even really concerned about how we win. How do we get mass deportations? How do we get the rest of it? At least if you say, we're going to punish Republicans. Like this administration needs to fail. Everyone in it needs to burn down and be weakened by it. At least then there's a possibility in 28 that the Trump administration alum are so unpopular, even in a primary, that somebody else could actually emerge and then run. Because the biggest concern is that, look, we all know this, the party is consolidating around Vance or Rubio. The money, the actual party apparatus. And what they're going to try to do is make it so there isn't a competition. They're going to make it so that there's one clear guy, probably the Trump backs, someone from the admin like Vance or Rubio. That person's going to get 70% of the vote. There's going to be a bunch of also-rans, and they're just going to jam that guy through so he can campaign really without a primary fight throughout 27 and 28, and then, lock it up for the next 4 years. And so the biggest threat actually is that candidate will be too strong and suffocate any possible challenger, any dark horse, an outsider. And by the way, if we get an outsider, that might be your victory. That might be your victory condition, where it is someone who was from that Trump coalition, saw where it went wrong, wants to fulfill the promises of it without kind of rejecting the fundamental premise. Someone like that can emerge. And then, if that person wins, then maybe that person can actually deliver the victory. But that's why I say, people are always saying like, well, who's that person going to be? Well, you don't know if that's even going to happen. It's like, well, we have to create the possibility that we can win. Otherwise, we're accepting defeat. Like you said earlier, either we're going 90 miles per hour or 85 miles per hour off the cliff.
To be honest, I'm not even sure it's 85. Like this might be just as fast, dude. It's just a different thing. I mean, it's like in the same sense, like, why do I hate the Democrats? It's like, I don't know, because like they I don't know, they're fiscally insane. They opened our borders. This is chaos and destruction. They push this trans insanity on little kids. This is evil, and this is abortion, is murder, this is death. It's like, this is all destruction and death, and it's just, this is all horrible. I'm not actually sure which one is worse, to be honest. They're all very bad. And, I guess maybe one of the things that's kind of frustrating about even having these debates is that it's nuanced and it's complex and it's broad. And like, for example, okay, so Pat Buchanan, who is really a hero of mine, I'd imagine like someone you would really admire as well. Brilliant conservative. He would always come back and support the Republicans.
Yes.
Yes.
And
he would eviscerate them. I mean, he would just like take them down, but he'd always come back and support them. And so he would be totally against George H.W. Bush in 92 because he's furious about the Persian Gulf War, although he never really made that as central of an issue as I think he should have. But, who am I to pick on a great man like that? But then he'd come back and he'd primary him. But then he'd lose and he'd come back, and you get that great famous culture war speech from Pat Buchanan at the RNC, which is, by the way, anyone should go listen to that speech. So beautifully done. I really admire great speech writing. He was a great speechwriter. But anyway, but that speech, the context of it is that he's at the RNC to bring the Buchanan, what did they call it?
Brigade.
The Buchanan Brigade back into the Republican Party. And he would make arguments like, hey, look, we feel how we feel. We disagree on all these issues, but whose Supreme Court justice picks are you going to like more? George H.W. Bush or Bill Clinton? On environmentalism, he's better. On tax policy, he's better. On all these. And like,
guys, if you're new to the channel, my name's Ricky. Channel name is Free Our Republic. We are no longer a sovereign nation if we allow our congressional and Senate seats to be sold to the highest bidder. At that point, there's not even a point in us voting. If you could, jump over to my YouTube, subscribe, like the video, share it, help me get my voice out there, help me make a difference. I appreciate you.
Now, I tend to kind of disagree with that. And I loved Ron Paul. Ron Paul would never come back and endorse the candidate. But, the thing is that in 1992, I can understand Pat Buchanan's argument. Because if you have a generally healthy country, and we could get into debating whether we were generally healthy or not, but compared to today, we were a much healthier country, much less divisive politically. The demographics were what traditional American demographics had been for most of the time, which are conducive to less cultural divides, let's say. We were not $40 trillion in debt. We were not like a failing empire. You know, there were things were, and in a healthy society, it kind of does make sense to go, look, I know there's a wish list of what we want, but let's go for better rather than worse. Again, when you have stage 4 cancer and you're
Right.
terminally ill, that's like when you go like, no, if we just get what is maybe slightly better, we die. Like this nation dies if we do that. So I guess part of it is that we're just arguing that like, no, the situation is actually that dire right now that we have to go for something better than this.
Well, that's the nail on the head. And, you know, I would even say something more controversial, which is, and no one's going to like this. but
You?
it's-
More controversial than me?
Well, controversial for people that like us, for the fans, but they need to hear this. I respect Pat Buchanan. He's brilliant. Obviously, off the charts, brilliant, great writer. Red pilled me with Death of the West and
Great book.
everything. But he is a loser. And I don't say that to be nasty, but he lost. He lost 3 times, right? He lost in 92, 96, lost for reform in 2000. And, you know, it's funny. Sam Francis, who is a friend of his, he wrote an article about his endorsement of Bush in 92 and said that was
Really?
Buchanan's biggest mistake.
I've never read that. Oh,
It's
that's
very interesting. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do.
But he wrote it at the time and said that's Buchanan's mistake, is that he always comes back to support the GOP. Why? You're at war with them. They're the enemy. They're the problem. And it's because he is the congenital conservative. And by conservative, I don't mean right wing. It's this risk aversion. He's not revolutionary.
No.
He's a reformer. And so in the end, they will always come back to the vomit. The dog will always come back to eat its vomit. They will always come back to endorse the conservative. And I think, by the way, that's now why there's this, people are becoming more comfortable with Pat Buchanan. Because 20 years ago, he was kicked off MSNBC for suicide of a superpower, which he was going to call The Death of Whitey. That was actually the original title.
Is that true?
Yes.
No.
Sam
Well,
Francis
Wow.
says this. Yeah.
Is that true? So there was a chapter in the book called like The End of White America. It was like close to that. One of the
Yes.
chapters. Great book, by the way. Suicide of a Superpower. Highly
Excellent.
recommend it.
But that was going to be the title. And point being is he was super controversial back then. You know, Shapiro called him a Nazi in 2016. He's alt-right, whatever. Now, I feel like people are coming around to his legacy. So some of these heritage Americans, pro-Trump people, they're embracing him. But why? Because he lost. And when you lose, you become inert. You're no longer threatening. And so I love Pat Buchanan. However, Francis also wrote a book called Beautiful Losers about the conservatives, and basically saying that conservatives are so principled, but they lose all the time. Like, we're losing the culture war. We're losing the immigration war. And they would rather lose as the civil, principled, whatever you want to say about them, you know, these kind of like Rockefeller Republicans, and actually get dirty and fight and win. And in the end, is it not the paleocons that were the beautiful losers? Is it not those people that, you know, they kind of went down without a huge, ugly fight? And I think about what is different between Buchanan and Trump. In 2016, when Trump was running in the primary, they said, will you endorse the eventual nominee if you don't get it? And Trump said no. Yeah. He said, I have a lot of leverage. He said, so I'd like to run as the Republican, but if I can't have the nomination, then maybe I'll run independent. And they said, well, Hillary Clinton will surely win. And he said, well, yeah, then elect me as the Republican. Otherwise, I'll tank the whole thing. And to me, that's like, and I told them that actually at the dinner. I said, that is when you were at your apex, because you were playing to win. Yeah. That's when I knew you were serious. You weren't just going to say, well, if I win, I win. If I don't, I guess we'll just have Republicans. It's like that burn the boats mentality. That's what we as the base need to develop, that kind of consciousness or that leadership.
No, I get what you're saying. You know, part of the, okay, I'm sorry to keep picking on Steven Crowder. It's nothing against Steven Crowder. It's just that literally this is what I'm thinking of when you say this. But so when,
don't feel sorry for picking on Steven Crowder. He is a talking head for the Trump administration. And those people should have no sympathy.
when I was debating Steven Crowder, he was very upset that I had called for Trump's impeachment. I had called for Trump's impeachment because of the 12-day war. Because, you know, to me, I'm like, yeah, you just launched an illegal war, and this is what we all voted against. And yeah, I'm for. Now, Crowder starts then getting into this argument. He's like, but if we impeached Donald Trump, then Nancy Pelosi has control. And I was like, well, first off, that would put JD Vance in as president.
Right.
But then at a certain point I went, Stephen, when I say we should impeach Donald Trump, you realize I'm not a congressman who's introducing articles of impeachment. There's no point that I believe this is going to result in this process and then the benefit of that process. Obviously, all I'm saying is like, I publicly supported Donald Trump, and now I am saying in the loudest possible language that I'm out. I'm done. And I do think there's part of my thinking there was along the lines of what you're saying, where it's like, no, look, dude, this only works if there's like a profit and loss system.
Right.
Like there has to be like, okay, you promise me no new wars, I publicly support you. You launch a new war, I publicly not just like don't support you, but like fuck you, die a million deaths, you'll never get my support again. Because otherwise, like, I don't know, there's just got to be some type of incentive for like, if you want to come do this, I don't know, we don't have much, but the one thing we do have is that we can very publicly say, no, Vance, Rubio, none of you are getting this coalition. And therefore, at least there's some political incentive of like, someone want to come pick up this coalition or not. I do agree with you that, or at least I agree, I don't think Patrick Buchanan's a loser, but politically, I get your point. He did lose. I think that there's something, especially now when supermajorities of the American people are against this war. Supermajorities of the American people are against Biden's immigration policy. Supermajorities are against the woke trans insane shit. Supermajorities think that inflation is the number one issue. When you have that type of dynamic, we should be playing to win. Like,
Right.
Why can't we win this country? You know what I mean? Like, if there was an open primary right now, and don't get me wrong, I want to be honest about this. If someone were to run on your most radical views or my most radical views, they probably could not win with that.
Right.
But if there was like open primaries on the Democrat and Republican side right now, and someone were to run on a full separation of Israel and America, like we're treating it like church and state, a full separation of Israel and America, dissolving the Israel lobby entirely. If they were to run on closing the border and an immigration moratorium, if they were to run on, fiscal sanity, no new wars, no, like there are major pieces here that could absolutely be a winning coalition in this country. That was not the case when Pat Buchanan was running. That wasn't the case when Ron Paul was running for president. And so like, we do live in a new dynamic with new realities. And I agree with you. I think we shouldn't be, we shouldn't concede that, well, if it's a little bit better than the Democrats, then we support it. And we shouldn't concede that like, hey, you go out there and you completely lose, but you were politically noble and you made some good points and that's enough. Because at the end of the day, none of that saves the country.
Right. Well, and think about it. What if Buchanan had not endorsed George Bush? He would have lost anyway. And what would have been the lesson in 92? It's like, maybe we should have been more conservative. Maybe in 96, we run somebody that gets the Buchanan
Well, by the
brigades.
way, just to even strengthen your point here, right? Because when he's giving the culture war speech at the RNC in 92, he's already lost. George H.W. Bush goes on to lose to Bill Clinton anyway.
Exactly.
So the Buchanan brigade did not make the difference. But if he had withheld that, it may have been seen as maybe that would have made the difference.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It would have been ambiguous. And more to the point, we have to think about those second and third order consequences. People say, well, what if a Democrat wins? Yeah, what if? What you're talking about is moral hazard, which is if there's no consequences for your actions, then they will get away with anything. And I said this to Crowder. It's like, dude, we're in a war with Iran. At what point will you stop supporting Trump? What would he have to do to lose your support? Because if you're willing to tolerate that, you'll tolerate anything. And if you tolerate anything, you will be forced to tolerate anything. That's sort of where we are. And so it's important to now and again, and like I said this to Crowder, like I wouldn't want a Democrat to become the president because I think that's really bad for everybody. But where you can and where it makes sense, you have to impose some kind of a cost. Just so you tell them, like, we will not put up with this, we will not tolerate it. And I always tell people that's just playing both sides. That's just basic game theory. And by the way, everybody else does it. The donors do it in particular. How many of these pro-Israel people were lifelong Democrats until October 7th? And then they threw their weight around behind the Republicans to get concessions. Same thing with little tech. Elon Musk. was he ever a Republican up until a few years ago when he started getting heat from the Biden DOJ and getting all these problems? No. So
Tulsi, Bobby, yeah.
Exactly. And they will move their money around whoever is going to help them. The donors do it. By the way, the Israel lobby does it. Ben Shapiro in 2016 said, let Hillary Clinton win. Trump, we can't trust him. He's not a real conservative. So we just need that kind of leadership and kind of like our mojo as the base to say, we need to be in the driver's seat, not people telling us, oh, we'll get him next time. Oh, well, we built, 36 inches of wall or whatever. That's how we got to think going forward.
Millions of inches.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to know how much wall has been built this term? 25 to 50 feet of primary wall and 60 to 90 feet of secondary wall. That's it.
Well, no, I mean, a good example of that would, I don't know if you saw this, but when Donald Trump first announced the ceasefire with Iran, Mark Levin was out there like really counter signaling him hard.
Right.
What do you mean, sir? They still have all the enriched uranium. They're still supporting the proxies. This terror regime still stands. So it's not like they won't flip on a dime. So essentially, why shouldn't I do the same thing? And I do got to say, and I'm sure you feel this way too, to some degree at least, right? But there seems like there's kind of a thing where, okay, because of the mix of where technology kind of grew and people's disgust with the regime and the corporate media being exposed for being liars, this whole industry has been revolutionized. And now for the first time, things that are much different than say Pat Buchanan's days or Sam Francis's days are that, I shouldn't say they're, Pat Buchanan's still alive, but I mean, when the days where he was running for president are like, we kind of have a fighting shot in the conversation now.
Right.
We actually get to get our rebuttal heard as well. So there's still dynamics where there's certain groups, like I think probably you are demonized to a lot of baby boomers and they don't get to hear from you, right? Like they hear about you through someone else, but they may not like actually hear like what you're really saying. But for huge other swaths of an audience, they get to hear your side also. And this is true for me too. And this is true for a lot of us. And broadly speaking, people, let's say, who have been, because me and you represent different worldviews and different principles, but broadly speaking, let's say the people who are critical of Israel or critical of this war or critical of open borders we've gotten to be in the debate. We've gotten to have a chance to have big public debates, to have big public shows, and we have just won. We have won the argument with the American people. Like, there just is no question. Like, who is, if you look at like me and you, and then say throw in like Tucker and Candace and Megan, or just like broadly speaking, the people who are more critical of, say, this move in Iran versus Lindsey Graham, like we've won the argument. Which I keep doing these debates, but at this point I almost say like the debate's over. This is just a formality.
Right.
When I go on Piers Morgan today to debate a Zionist, it's like, I've already won. We know I've won. We know you've like this side has dominated. This is a pro-Palestinian country at this point. Like and yet we still lose the policy. And there is something about that that's fucking intolerable. Like, no, fuck you. We like, and this is the most little d Democrat I'll ever be in my life. But like, there is something like, hey, no, we had the open debate. We had the marketplace of ideas and you guys got fucking schooled. So why the fuck should Mark Levin still get, no one thinks Mark Levin got Donald Trump elected, but Tucker Carlson played a major role. So why do we get the policies of him versus him? This is just wrong. And it's not just wrong. It's so intolerable that you're like, I just can't go along with that.
It is intolerable. And you realize that there's no relationship between what the public supports and the policies we get, because arguably the country's never been more anti-Israel, and yet the policies have never been more pro-Israel, right? Like from Harvard and what they're doing, Department of Ed, to the visas, to obviously what's going on in Israel. There's literally no limit to what they're able to get away with. And you'd never know it if you go on the internet on the right and the left. You go on Instagram and you're getting like AI translated Hitler speeches and like normies from like Southern universities that are like, you make some good points. That's the right wing. And the left wing is Hassan Piker, who's like pro-terrorism, like straight up pro-Hamas. And you go, so I wonder what the government looks like. Like, we must have some kind of anti-Semitic regime. It's like, nope, we're in a war with Iran. If you criticize Israel, you can't go to the World Cup or enter America. So, and that's where I tell people, what is enough? What's your limit before you say we're out? Because people are still, it's just pure cope. People just saying, no, here's how we could still win. We could get it back on track. They really want to, but they can't. It's like, we just need, it's not even so much people say what candidate, it's just about rejection. Like, no, I reject this. I reject this. No, this is not good enough. And moreover, and you already said this, but it's true. We are in such a bad situation. The only thing that will fix the country is radical intervention. Otherwise, the country dies. $40 trillion debt, 50 million illegals, demographic change. The country is already dead. It's just dying in slow motion.
Oh, yeah. Not even that slow. I mean, yeah.
No, yeah, right. I mean, these days, very quickly, but it's like you're either going to have a radical intervention or you're going to die. Are Vance and Rubio radical? No.
No.
You know, are the Democrats going to be radical? Well, they're part of the problem. The only thing that's going to solve it is if you just get a different option. So for me, it's just like, let's just reshuffle and re-roll until we get something different. And, you know, that's what a lot of Republicans just can't handle. They don't have the imagination for that, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it was, I was never a Republican partisan, so it just was easier for me to kind of come to that conclusion, but I completely agree with you on that. Not that I'm saying the Libertarian Party is the answer or something like that. I don't know, but obviously something else other than this. So I want to talk to you about Thomas Massey's election, his primary, which is coming up, I believe, the day after tomorrow. This is a really fascinating, I think the most fascinating House primary election I've ever seen. It's the more money has been spent on this election than any other.
$35 million by AIPAC to primary the most conservative congressman we have that is not even labeled an anti-Semite. He is just anti-interventionalist, and he exposed the Epstein files for what they are. So his payback is Miriam Adelson will throw as much money as she can at a candidate that nobody's ever heard of to get him elected. It's fucking disgusting.
This, speaking of intolerable, I mean, this is really like quite an example of it. So Thomas Massey, I mean, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but he won his previous primaries with like 78%, 85%. It was just, has been a multiple successful winner, political winner, at least in his district in Kentucky. He really angered the Israel lobby. Particularly in his Tucker Carlson interview, where he exposed that he's the only one who doesn't have an AIPAC handler, and like was doing something that, you know, even like guys like, say, me or you, or people who are very critical of the Israel lobby aren't exactly explaining like the nuts and bolts of the logistics of how it works in Congress. And he was really explaining that. Then, of course, he made his famous stand to get the Epstein files declassified and really embarrassed the administration, and kind of through some political maneuvering was actually able to kind of like get them to tap out and release it. And then, of course, he opposes both the 12-day war and this current war in Iran. And so this has now gotten the Israel lobby has poured tens of millions of dollars, or at least $20 million, I think, has been put into the race, and they've made it a much more competitive race. This, to me, is going to be very interesting to see what happens here. I saw Michael Knowles tweeted the other day, when there's this stuff that's going on, which I'm sure you've been seeing, but it's like obvious op stuff, obvious op. I mean, like literally like 3 days before the election, all of a sudden there's a scandal. All of a sudden there's one woman with no corroborating accounts who says he paid me hush money, not even alleging criminal activity or anything like that. Then the betting markets start like changing. Clearly people are putting money in and influencing this. So Michael Knowles over at the Daily Wire, who I don't dislike Michael Knowles, but his take on this was he goes, man, if Thomas Massey loses, this just shows the iron grip that Donald Trump has on the Republican Party.
Oh, brother.
And you're like, dude, I mean, I think it shows the iron grip that the Israel lobby has. If they're
Yeah,
like, that might be a slightly more accurate take. But then I also go, and I'll be interested because I think Thomas Massey's going to win. I think it's close, but I think he's going to pull this off. I wonder what Michael Knowles' reaction to that will be. So
Yeah.
if it proves that Trump has an iron grip when Massey falls out, what about when Thomas Massey wins and survives $20 million being pumped into his district? What would
Much
that,
more than that
suggest? So I'm curious, like, what are your thoughts on Thomas Massey and on this race?
Well, I like Thomas Massey. I mean, he is a libertarian. So
yeah.
I don't agree.
So what's wrong with us?
You know, I don't agree with him on everything.
Sure.
But I support him only because he has made himself the, this kind of rallying point against AIPAC, because like you said, he took that stand on the interview and he voted against foreign aid to Israel in 24, among other things. So it's just a no-brainer to support him in the primary and just in general, because it's symbolic. He is one of the only Republicans that's consistently gone against Israel. And there's no question that's exactly why they're coming for him. And they did this in 24. AIPAC did against Jamal Bowman and Cory Bush and a few other progressive Democrats. They spent $100 million in the 24 cycle, and in particular, trying to primary everybody that voted against that foreign aid bill. And I believe it was April of 24 when they greenlit $25 billion for Israel, when they defended themselves against Iran or whatever it was, so they could fight Gaza more. And so that's what they do. They're doing it on the Republican side. And I agree with you. I think he'll win, but it is interesting. That is how they convince themselves that it is in Israel. I've seen the take from Michael Knowles. I've seen many people say this, that what's the real reason Massey is terrible? Well, it's not because he happens to be the one Republican against AIPAC. No. It's because he votes against Trump. He's like not a diligent enough Republican partisan. He's not a loyal member of the conference. And it gets back to even we talked about was frustrating about my debate with Crowder. Like it's along that same theme. Yeah. It's like, so do you really believe that? Like, I know that's like, you can look at any answer and some of them have explanatory power. Like it's true that Massey's anti-Republican, but is that plausible? Like, do you think that that's actually true? Obviously not. And Michael Knowles, like he went to Yale. So you think that this is really about AIPAC spent $20 million to buttress Trump's loyalty? Yeah. Obviously this is about something else. And, you wonder what's going on with Michael Knowles. Well, he works for Shapiro.
That doesn't help.
But these are the things they tell themselves about the party. They say the Iran war is about China. They say Massey's about Trump. They say everything is about everything other than what it's actually about. And that's when you want to say, so are you a liar? Are you a fucking liar?
Do you see Trump literally after meeting with Xi said, we're going to be sending tons of oil to China?
Yeah.
We're going to be, tell me this was all about starving resources to China, the levels of cope. But it couldn't be this lobby that's openly lobbied for this for 30 years. Oh, the longest serving prime minister in Israeli history said after we launched the war that this was a culmination of his entire life's work. But let's ignore that, that probably has nothing to do with that. No, I mean, that's, I think what frustrated me, there was this one time that J.D. Vance was asked about Thomas Massey. And he basically just said, he goes, look, man, he just keeps voting against us. And at a certain point, like, this is politics, man. If you keep voting against us, we're not going to support you. And I remember hearing that and just going, yeah, okay. Because that just basically backs up everything we've been saying. That's right. It's politics.
It's
and
politics.
Us never supporting you again is also
right,
politics.
Right.
So like, okay, yeah, you're not voting with me. Okay, well, you're trying to unseat. Now, obviously, you like Thomas Massey, but you're not a libertarian. I like him, and I am a libertarian. So to me, it's just like the absolute. You're trying to take away the one guy that I have who represents me in Congress for the crime of telling the truth about some important issues. Like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Go fuck yourself, and I'll never support you ever again. I mean, that's politics, right? Anyway, it will just be very.
Thomas Massey is being crucified because he's against foreign aid to Israel and because he exposed the Epstein files. And when I say expose the Epstein files, I mean he exposed the fact that it was a Mossad intelligence operation that had the full backing of the Israeli government, and they were actively blackmailing American politicians for leverage. That is what Thomas Massey did to have $35 million thrown in his face by Miriam Adelson to his opponent. A man named Ed Gallerin that nobody has ever heard of, and Massey has tried to debate 8 times, and he has no-showed all 8. Why? Because he knows that he can't beat Massey.
Interesting. They've really smeared the guy, and of course the millions of dollars that they're pouring in are being used for these ad campaigns. It's all ridiculous shit. I also hate when I'll see this thing like out of conservatives sometimes where they just like they do the same shit the Democrats do after they were just blasting the Democrats for doing that.
Right.
Like I remember even late great Charlie Kirk. No, disrespect. I liked Charlie and stuff, but I remember I used to see this out of him sometimes. It would really bother me. Where like during Obama, you'd see Obama would brag about the unemployment rate. And then he would go, yeah, but the unemployment rate is bullshit because it doesn't account. My words, not his. He wouldn't have cursed. But he goes, that the unemployment rate doesn't account for people who have given up entirely on looking for work, which is like fair point. And then Donald Trump comes in and he goes, lowest unemployment rate ever. You're like, oh, all of a sudden that number is good.
Right.
They just do this type of thing. So then they start doing the thing where they go, Thomas Massey voted against border security. You're like, no, he didn't, dude. He voted against a 3,000-page bill that spent like $3 trillion. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, no, dude. He did. If you ever put that standalone, he would vote for that. That's not the issue. And so there's just like a lot of dirty tricks that I'm like, I just don't like seeing this against like forget even whether you're a libertarian or anything else. Thomas Massey is like one of the few decent guys. He's being honest.
Right.
He's running on what he believes in. He's voting. His voting track record backs up what he told you he was going to vote when he doesn't go in there. Like to go after and then not just try to unseat him, but to really try to like ruin the guy's life. I really just, I don't know. The way Trump's gone after him and Joe Kent for getting remarried is like, I just find disgusting. Particularly when Donald Trump, in the case of Joe Kent, his wife died in Syria under you.
Right.
Like, I'm sympathetic to Trump supporters because I think for a long time he was like the only weapon you had. And oh my God, we actually get a fighting shot against this evil regime. And so people forgive a lot of his kind of vulgar, stuff. But you're like, dude, you really are a piece of shit, man.
Yeah.
Like, you're really a piece of shit. You're the one who fucking cheats all over your wife and fucks porn stars and has had 3 different marriages and shit. This guy, he lost his wife to a suicide bomber in Syria, a war you were supposed to get us out of and didn't. And now you're trashing him for getting married 2 years later. Just so bizarre, man. I don't know.
He is. He's wicked. He's a wicked human being.
Yeah.
And he's really showed his hand. I mean, because you're right. 10 years ago, I think the way people saw it is that the left was so powerful and so evil. It felt like they were unstoppable and nothing could ever change. It was so oppressive and suffocating. I remember it growing up. The political correctness, the liberal media, and it just felt like Republicans were pussies, like they could never win and they would never fight back. And, guys like Mitt Romney and John McCain, they were complete losers.
They're there to lose, essentially. Like that's the point of them, is to lose it. It's like wrestling, like to lose and get this guy over while
exactly.
I lose,
Yeah, they were there to basically, it's a fix, they were there to throw. And so you see Trump, and he was what he was, but we said, okay, he's the underdog. He's fighting for us. He's brash. He's a little unconventional, but maybe he can win. And now you kind of see all these years later, I think that maybe his true self just emerged. You realize like he sort of is everything they said that he was, which is he is a liar. It is really all just about vanity and glory and his own, what's the word? Self-aggrandizement.
Yeah,
I mean, that's really what it was always about. And even these things like comparing himself to Jesus, talking about killing Persia on Easter. No happy Easter, by the way. Not Christ is risen. We're going to kill a civilization tomorrow.
Which is fairly inconsistent with Christ's message, from my understanding.
Yeah, it's a little. You know what? It is consistent. It's consistent with the message of Purim. the Jewish holiday. Inconsistent a little bit though with Easter, and so,
All right, listen, the Old Testament God was a bit meaner.
it's a little more hardcore.
Yeah, that's true.
Some of the Marcionites have something to say about that, but
Yeah.
but yeah, so he's a wicked human being, and like you said, it's such a good point. When it's Thomas Massey, they go, "Yeah, well, that's politics. Well, that's just how the cookie crumbles." Oh, you're not voting for us in the midterms? Oh my gosh, you're a left-wing Democrat. I can't believe you. And at the end of the day, Charlie Kirk, say what you want, he was on the team. He was with them.
Yep.
And even with Iran, people say, no, he was coming around. He was about to flip. He was really going to be based. When Trump bombed Iran the first time, Charlie Kirk defended it.
Yeah.
And they did the same goalpost thing. When Israel started the war.
That is a lie. Joe Kent, Tucker Carlson will confirm that Charlie Kirk spent days in the White House trying to convince Trump not to bomb Iran because it would turn into a protracted conflict. And it was Charlie that convinced Trump to proceed with a limited bombing campaign rather than what the Adelsons wanted. So that is a fucking lie.
Charlie said, we shouldn't get involved. We need to stay out of this. It's Israel's thing. When we got involved by shooting down the missiles, he said, well, we shouldn't get involved offensively. Yeah. We can, and then it was, well, but we shouldn't bomb Iran. Then we bomb Iran. Well, we shouldn't do regime change. Then Trump said on True Social, well, I think we should do a regime change. And then Charlie Kirk said, well, guys, there's a big difference between a bottom-up revolution and a top-down regime change. We support a revolution. And so it's like anything that Trump would have done, he would have supported.
All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which, of course, is Body Brain Coffee. And the big news is that the Body Brain Creamer is officially here. I don't know about you, but I like creamer in my coffee. And Body Brain just put out their creamer, which perfectly partners with Body Brain Coffee. It's all good for you. It's not the creamer you get at the supermarket that's sugary and has a bunch of crap in it. In the spirit of Body Brain, it's all good ingredients that are going to be helpful for you. It's stuff that helps with stress and focus and overall vitality. So it's perfect to pair with Body Brain Coffee, which of course naturally boosts testosterone. This way, it's not like a sports drink or some weird health drink. It's a cup of coffee with some creamer, 1 cup a day. You're going to feel better. I've been drinking this stuff for months now, and I feel great. Go check them out, bodybraincoffee.com. Of course, this is the creation of the great Louis J. Gomez, who convinced me to start part of the problem. So if you love this show, make sure you go support them and get yourself a delicious cup of coffee. Naturally boosts testosterone. You're going to feel great. Bodybraincoffee.com. Promo code Dave20 for 20% off your entire order. One more time, that's bodybraincoffee.com. Promo code Dave20 for 20% off. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Ridge. I love the Ridge watch.
All right, guys, I'm getting off. I will do a part 2 of the stream. Please jump over to my YouTube channel, Free Our Republic. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, drop a comment, share the video. Help me get my channel out there, guys. I appreciate all of you.